Hey guys, MCU Collector here with another video. This is the Hasbro versions, the Power Rangers Lightning Collection. Again, these are the new Hasbro figures. Hasbro just took over the license, just took over all of Power Rangers. So here is the second figure. Now this is the last figure that I'm going to review from the wave, because unfortunately I'm only going to be collecting the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Though that was my favorite. That's what I grew up watching. All these other Rangers I'm just not familiar with, such as the Dino Charge Red Ranger. I got that one all wrong in the last Lord Zedd video, so the Dino Charge Red Ranger. I'm just not familiar with those Rangers. I didn't watch the show. I'm not going to collect the figures because they're just it's just these ones, it's more of a nostalgia factor, and then plus they look like very good figures. Now, I don't know what the Rangers are like. That Lord Zedd figure is pretty awesome. But in this video, I'm going to be going over the White Ranger and reviewing him. But what I'm also going to do is do a comparison with the Bandai Legacy Collection White Ranger. So these are two very different figures, even though they're very much the same. This is a 6-inch line Hasbro puts out, and then the Bandai was a 6.5-inch line, which is very weird to begin with. So we're going to check out the two, see them side by side, and then we're going to compare this guy to some Legends to see how he kind of scales up. A lot of people were asking about that. I will do that here in this video. Let's get right to it right now. And because it might come up, there is the UPC. There's nothing going on in the box. There's no bio or anything, so I'm not going to do that. Now, let's get to the figure. Okay, so here is the White Ranger Tommy Oliver out of the package, and I can tell you already, right now, I really, really like this figure. So before we get into the comparison between the Bandai and the Hasbro, let's first take a look at these accessories because they look pretty cool, and I'm actually going to do a comparison of the accessories here as well. Okay, guys, so here's a close-up look at the unmasked Tommy Oliver head, or what's his name, Jason David Frank, back, you know, when he was much younger and had long hair. And I think this looks very good. It's basically on par with the digital print scans that we've seen with Black Series and with Marvel Legends. Some are great, some are good, some are not good. I would call this one good. I would not call it great, but I think it does look pretty good. But I think it presents some challenges, especially when you have something that's, you know, 20 plus years old, or God, how old is it now? 25 years old? Oh man, it's old. So, you know, somebody from 25 years ago, what can they really base it off of, except, you know, probably low quality images. So I think Hasbro did a really good job with it. Next up is this really cool blast effect looking thing. And basically what this is, because it took me a minute to figure this out because you can't really see it, but right in there, as it focuses on my finger, right in there is a little slot that you're going to actually put at the end of Saba. So you could do like a blast effect. So if he's hitting something, you know, maybe Lord Zedd, and I'll show you that later, that's kind of how it would look as it bangs up against something. So that's pretty cool. I like how he did that. He comes with interchangeable hands, one set. This is the left hand that's already packaged on the figure, but I just brought it out anyway. One thing I want to note about it, it's typical like with Hasbro, with you know, Marvel Legends, how you swap out the hands, but this peg is ridiculously long, so I'm worried that over time it's going to warp and going to get harder, and it may not be able to port back into the wrist. So you want to be careful with that because that peg is extra long, and the same goes for the right hand as well. So he has two fists. His right hand, he has an additional open hand to hold Saba, and then the left hand is his karate chop hand, if that's, I guess, what you would call it. Now let's take a look at both Sabas. Okay, so here we have the two different versions of Saba. Now, the size difference is obviously because you have a 6-inch scale versus a 6.5-inch scale. So this is the Bandai version. This is the Hasbro version. They both look pretty good, but the Bandai has a more textured detail in the blade. Since it's a little bit larger, I think they could do that, whereas Hasbro kind of has something going on there, but it's not quite to the detail level that Bandai does on their blade there. Now, as far as Saba himself, both look good, and both, you know, I think it'll come down to preference. From what I can remember, I don't remember what color face Saba had. On the Bandai, he has a white face with red eyes. On the Hasbro, they did not paint eyes on him, but they made him all silver. But they also gave him black paint throughout the back of his. He's a tiger, so I was gonna say mane, but they actually painted stripes on him, whereas the Bandai did not give him stripes, but they have the textured detail in there. and then the rest of it is basically the same, and it kind of goes on which kind of gold you like. This is a darker gold, this one's a brighter gold. They're both metallic, so again, it's going to go off of preference, but it's, you know, it's a little difficult, especially since there are two different scales. You know, on something that's a little bit larger, you can get more detail in the open mouth, whereas the Hasbro doesn't have as much, but it's still there. So, you know, which one's the clear winner? It's hard to say. One thing I'm noticing now on mine is on the left side, well, I guess depending on how you look at it, but right here, there's gold there on the side of Saba. On the other side, there is not. So I don't know if that's a paint defect on mine where I'm just missing paint. You guys will have to let me know how yours is down in the comments below. I'm not sure there, but they both look very good. It's hard to say which one's the clear winner, but overall aesthetic, the bigger one kind of looks better to me. So Bandai might win in that aspect. So let's take a look at the figures. Okay, so here are the two figures next to each other. Now the Bandai, again, is a 6.5 inch scale, so of course it is going to be larger than the Hasbro version. Looking at the two together, I think I like more the Hasbro release, because one thing that Hasbro has done, and I prefer this over like with SH Figure Arts, or it depends, because you can actually see like textured detail on the fact that this is a suit compared to this, which is just all smooth plastic. And a lot of the Figure Arts figures kind of do that for me. I'm thinking the Captain America Infinity War figure. Head sculpt is terrible, but looking at the suit itself, it's very smooth. Whereas I know that SH Figure Arts can do textured detail, but for whatever reason, some of those figures they didn't. But this one kind of reminds me of that with Bandai. It's all very smooth. There's no wrinkles into the costume. Anything that's sculpted is just actual parts of the costume, whereas the Hasbro release, you know, there's wrinkles in the suit, like in the knees, in the elbows, right over here at the hips. I kind of prefer that aesthetic on my figures, but it's going to be up to preference for you guys. Another thing that I noticed on this, and you know, maybe I'm wrong, but you know, these legs are really long on the Bandai version, and you know, all the parts are going to be reused, and I have no doubt that Hasbro is going to do the same when it comes to the other Rangers. It looks odd to me. I don't know. Again, it's going to come down to preference on what you prefer. But this figure does a lot of things well, whereas this does a lot of things well also. So I don't know that there's going to be a clear cut which figure is better. It's going to come down to what you're going to prefer. And what I prefer is the Hasbro, because it's at the 6 inch scale, and again, because of those aesthetic details that I had mentioned. Whereas this figure, he looks very beefy. His legs are all, you know, like he never missed leg day kind of thing. So that's just my thing. The golds are different, whereas this figure, the gauntlet pieces and the head, the helmet have great looking gold, the same that you would kind of see on the Saba. I think that gold looks great. The belt, the chest armor, and those two things just don't look as good to me. I don't, it doesn't, you know, there's no paint. It's more the molded plastic, whereas it looks like gold paint here, even on the arm. That band is gold paint. The legs, it looks okay. That's just my thing, whereas this has matching gold throughout. You know, again, it's not as bright, it's a darker gold, but I do really like the way it looks. I'm not going to go over the articulation of this figure because, you know, you guys have probably seen that before. I'm sure there's a bunch of review videos that you guys can check out. I'm going to focus more on this one, but I did want to show the side-by-side comparison of the two so you guys can see the difference. And then also on the back, you know, we're not looking at really anything different as far as that. So again, both very good looking figures, but for me, Hasbro wins this. If I can get him to stand. Both of these figures actually had some trouble. And then this is a brighter white, whereas the Hasbro release is not as bright a white, which seems more realistic as far as the suit. Now let's check out this Power Ranger, White Ranger, next to some regular Marvel Legends so you guys can see some of those comparisons. Okay, here's White Ranger next to Gambit. I'm going to choose some figures that are kind of close by me. So next to Gambit, and you can see Gambit is a lot taller, whereas movie figures tend to end up being a little bit shorter. Here he is next to Forge. This is probably a bad choice because I can't get Forge to stand because I hate the tiny feet of Bucky Cap, and mine's still a little warped. But you can see even a Bucky Cap figure is still a little bit taller than him. Looking at some of the female figures, here we have Blink, and you can see it's about the same height maybe even just a tad bit shorter than Blink. If we can get her to stand, you can see the size comparison there. Let's take a look at some more. Okay, here he is next to Ant-Man. Here he is next to Ronan. You can see that we're kind of getting a little bit more in line with the heights because, again, movie figure versus comic figure kind of shows a little bit of the differences. And going with some taller Marvel Legends, here he is next to Hercules. You can see there is a major size difference there. Let's see another one. Another Marvel Legend that's kind of on the shorter side. We look at Iron Spider, and there's a huge difference. He's towering over Peter Parker. So it just kind of depends on the figure, but again, they're going to be similar in terms of articulation. You know, he may be actually a little bit more in line with maybe a Black Series figure. I don't have any of those to show any comparisons, unfortunately, but I would probably equate him to more of a Black Series figure, I think, because, you know, the arms being a little bit thinner reminds me of a little bit more of Black Series. So let's get right to the articulation on him now. Okay, so looking at the height of this White Ranger, he is just at 6 inches, maybe just a hair over. So we look at 6-inch scale, he is right there at the 6-inch scale mark. So the articulation, he can look down, he can look up, so great motion there. You get a full swivel. Tiny bit of pivot, not a whole lot. I forgot to mention earlier, this chest piece is a rubber piece, and it doesn't look like it can really come off anywhere. There's no plugs or anything to get this pulled off. If you want to warm it up, pop the head off, there might be some way to get that off, but it's a nice rubbery piece, so it's not going to hinder or get in the way of anything, which I really like. So shoulders can go up that high. You can't get a full rotation out of there, even with the armor. There is a bicep swivel up there. You get a double jointed elbow, which works great. That's only actually one going. Let's see if we can get that other one. So you get a good motion in the elbow there. The wrists all swivel. They do hinge there. And one thing that maybe you guys didn't know, there is a butterfly joint in there. It's just this chest armor is really hiding it. So you can get the arm to go that far back. And then forward, you can get pretty far forward as well. So great movement in there. There is a diaphragm joint in there as well, so you can get pivot to that side, pivot to that side. You can pivot forward ever so slightly, not a whole lot. Going back, you can do a little bit. And there's also the ab crunch, so you can get him to bend down that far forward, and you get him to bend back probably too much, and it still looks pretty good. Now this torso piece is a little thin here, but it's all pretty much proportionate with the rest of the figure, whereas the Bandai, the torso was real small, but the legs were still kind of large in my opinion. There is no waist swivel, but again, you have that diaphragm joint to really help out with that. So no waist swivel. That's kind of unfortunate. Legs can go out that far apart, which is great. He can kick that far forward. Not a whole lot of motion going back. There is an upper thigh cut there. You have a solid double jointed knee, which works out great. There is a boot swivel right at the top of this cuff, and then you get ankle pivot, and then you can hinge the foot all the way down. And you want to be careful. You can get it up hardly any, unfortunately. But again, the articulation is good. Again, on par with Marvel Legends or with Black Series. I do like the way that looks. Now let's pop the head off and see how that looks. I'm getting close for that. Okay, so to pop the head off, just with Marvel Legends figure, we're going to pop that off and then just pop the unmasked head on, which is not as easy as I would like. There it is. And I think that looks really good. I think it's very proportionate as well. It doesn't look too small. It doesn't look too big. You know, keeping in mind that this is a helmet that goes on top, I think that looks very good. Now, somebody asked, Clow, she asked how a head swap would look if you can swap heads with a Marvel Legends figure. And let's give it a shot, shall we? So we got the White Ranger there. I'm thinking, what is a good head to swap that I have here in front of me? And sorry, I'm going with Forge because he's got a ponytail as well. So can they swap? Kind of. Man, what happened to my Forge figure? Something on his nose. So kind of, the neck pegs are very similar. It's on there, but it's very loose. Let's see if now if you can put these heads on a Marvel Legend. Not on this one, but there might be ones that you could. So it just depends on kind of what figure you're going to do. The neck pegs and everything are very similar, so I wouldn't be surprised if you are able to switch it out with some figures, but it's just, again, it's going to depend on what you can find. Oh, yeah, that head's a little bit more difficult to put on. It fits on a lot more snug, but it does look very good. So I like the way that looks there. Now let's see some shots with him with Zedd. And just to kind of demonstrate that effect piece and how it would look, you know, if he's striking something, it would show that, you know, he's kind of hitting the mark there. So that's just kind of how it looks. Now let's see them side by side. Okay, and here they are side by side, and I think this is a very good size comparison between the two, because Zedd should be kind of bulkier and bigger than White Ranger, but they're a little bit close to the same height, so they fit perfectly in scale. Now, one thing I do have a major complaint on this White Ranger figure, and I didn't realize it until now, is this Saba fitting into his hand doesn't actually work out that well. You can see the fingers don't actually wrap around Saba, and they don't really. I mean, as much as you want to try and work those fingers to get around the handle, it's not going to happen. So Saba fits kind of loose and can fall out easily. So that is very unfortunate that the hands aren't open more so to hold Saba. Now, what I'm thinking is that the other Rangers that are going to be coming out with either their weapons or their blasters, that they're probably going to still use the same hand, even though Saba's handle is quite large. So be on the lookout for that. I'm sure that's something that's going to be coming down the line. But here we go. So Hasbro's first wave into Power Rangers, and I think they did a fantastic job overall. A couple of gripes here and there on the White Ranger, but overall I think it does look very good, and I'm very happy to continue collecting the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers line from Hasbro. So there it is. If you guys have any questions, let me know down in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think of the White Ranger. What do you think of Lord Zedd? What do you think of the Legacy Bandai collection figure? Which one is your favorite? Which one do you prefer? I'm very curious to know. Please let me know down in the comments below. Also, if you guys liked the video, please hit that thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and as always, thank you guys for watching.